What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 6, 2019, start of a brand new week. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's been a very busy news day. Been a busy news weekend, as a matter of fact. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Sam is in our control room ready to answer the phone. Put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So let's get right on into it. Today, of course, is the anniversary of the crash of the Hindenburg, which brought an end to the age of the airship and basically cleared the skies for heavier than air traffic. Yesterday, of course, was Cinco de Mayo. Over the weekend was also the anniversary of Alan Shepard's flight, launching America's entry into the space race here. But I think we need to start off turning to the war zones because there's a lot of stuff going on over there. The United States has dispatched an aircraft carrier and a bomber squadron to the Middle East, basically as a threat to Tehran, claiming there are clear indications that Iran and its proxy forces were preparing to possibly attack U.S. forces in the region. And John Bolton came on out and said they're deploying the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group and a bomber task force to the U.S. Central Command region, an area that includes the Middle East. And he said the move was in response to a number of troubling and escalatory indications and warnings, but as usual, did not provide more details. This is starting to smell already of Saddam's coming to get us with nuclear weapons here. So they're claiming that U.S. forces at sea and on land were thought to be potential targets of this Iranian action, and the Pentagon approved the deployments in response to those indications. According to the defense official who spoke on condition of anonymity because the official wasn't authorized to speak publicly. Boy, do we not recognize those patterns again here. So Bolton has announced that we're sending the carrier and the bomber squadron over there. And as it turns on out, where this all started, this is being reported by Axios, this is all coming from Israel. This is Israel saying, oh, we don't have any fine details right now. It's not very specific intelligence, but we're pretty sure that Iran is getting ready to do something very, very nasty, and you should just go on out there and preemptively strike them. So once again, we see that Israel is out there pushing the United States to war on Israel's enemies in the Middle East. And if you'll remember, back during the run-up to the war in Iraq, Israel was out there screaming that Iraq had all these weapons of mass destruction, and Iraq was doing this, and Iraq was doing that, none of which turned out to be true, of course. So it's a repeating pattern. We're seeing it all over again. Now, Mike Pompeo is out there saying that it's absolutely that the United States has seen escalatory action from Iran, which prompted the deployment of the carrier strike group, but again, had no details. What exactly has Iran done? He was asked if he could clarify what the escalatory actions are, and he said, no, I can't. So they're getting ready to launch on Iran. And they're going to try and claim that it's all Iran's fault, those evil Iranians. And, things are getting tough in Iran. They may be having to go back to rationing of essential foods and goods, which would be the first time since the Iran-Iraq War of 1980 through 1988. And this is due to all the sanctions imposed on the Islamic Republic. And that last war left nearly 2 million people dead and wounded on both sides. And it took years for Iran to recover from that. Now, over the weekend, there was a major escalation in Gaza. And it ended early today with a ceasefire, which as of right now appears to be holding. And apparently the ceasefire came into effect at about 4:30 a.m. local time after Israel and Hamas agreed to taper the fighting that reached the peak yesterday during Sunday. Now, Israel struck 320 sites in the Gaza Strip, and 25 Palestinians, including 2 pregnant women and 2 infants, were killed. More than 100 others wounded by these airstrikes. And one of the targets hit by Israel was the Anadolu News Agency in the Gaza Strip, which has prompted condemnation from around the world. Okay, so getting on back here. Once again, the New York Times distorted the story, trying to make it look like the Gazans were the aggressor and Israel, as always, the victim. And basically, the headline was, Gaza militants fire 250 rockets. Israel responds with airstrikes. And that's not exactly what happened, because if you go over and read in Haaretz, it tells a much more complicated story, beginning with the Great March of Return last Friday along the Gaza border, where an Israeli jeep came under fire. 1 Israeli officer received moderate wounds, and a soldier was wounded lightly. Then Israel responded with tanks and airstrikes, killing 2 Hamas military wing members. 2 more protesters were killed by Israeli fire in incidents along the border. Only then did Gaza militant groups respond with the rocket attack, leading to the escalation. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. And apparently there are 2 Palestinian groups. They're over in Cairo having discussions with senior Egyptian intelligence officials on ways of trying to end the current standoff. But Hamas and Islamic Jihad are both saying we're close to open war with Israel. Now, here is a scary story about just how much Washington, D.C. has been subverted and co-opted by Israel. Apparently, the United States is now going to review their ties with other nations based on their attitudes toward Israel. In other words, the United States will not be friends with any nations that are not all buddy-buddy with Israel, which could turn out to be a rather small number. But apparently this was announced by U.S. Special Envoy for Monitoring and Combating Anti-Semitism, Ellen Carr, stating that Washington may review its ties with certain states based on their attitudes towards Israel. And this is part of this policy shift that will equate opposition to the actions of the state of the Israel with anti-Semitism, which is like saying the only reason that people ever complained about the Nazis is they hate the German people. Pardon me. Carr further stated that he will be discussing the issue of anti-Semitism and its impact on bilateral relations with the U.S. with a number of countries and their heads in frank and candid conversations behind closed doors. However, he refused to specify the exact states and the possible steps that might be taken. This is the United States throwing its weight around for the benefit of the state of Israel. And that's a very scary situation. Clearly, these decisions about bilateral relations with other countries are not being made in terms of what is best for the United States of America. And that is a U.S. government totally out of control of the American people. Turkey has said that they may go into regions of Syria near Tel Rifat, despite an agreement with Russia to stay clear of the area. And apparently, Turkey's Vice President Fuat Oktay made the comments in an interview with broadcaster Kanal 7 on Sunday, a day after cross-border fire from the region claimed the life of a Turkish trooper. So again, the situation is escalating along there. Meanwhile, Turkey tried to go into a YPG position, did not work out so well. This was up in the Idlib de-escalation zone. And the pro-Turkish National Syrian Army, backed by Turkish special forces, launched a surprise attack on positions of the Kurdish People's Protections Unit in northern Aleppo. They briefly captured the town of Mar Arnez, but then they were forced to retreat under pressure. Later the same day, the so-called Afrin Liberation Forces released a statement claiming that at least 40 of these National Syrian Army forces were killed and 30 others were injured. There was no visual evidence provided to back that up. And of course, in a war, everybody's lying here. Apparently, the Syrian army has captured a strategic hilltop and has cut off a militant supply route along the Idlib-Hama axis. And the jihadist and Turkish-backed rebels launched a counteroffensive along the Idlib-Hama axis today. But the counteroffensive was short-lived, thanks in large part to the Syrian Arab Army's artillery units and the Air Force. And speaking of the Air Force, it looks like there's a full-on offensive being launched by the Syrian Army and the Russian Air Force across 3 different theaters in Syria. And it looks like it's areas in the countryside of Hama and Idlib, along with those supply routes. So this was apparently being done in retaliation for the frequent breaches and attacks by terrorists on what was a designated safe area. Over in Afghanistan, Taliban officials have issued a statement related to the ongoing Doha talks with the U.S. delegation. They report that they and the U.S. are getting closer on a timetable for the withdrawal of U.S. and NATO troops from Afghanistan. So that one, the second longest war the United States has ever been engaged in, may finally be coming to a close. And the report is the U.S. and the Taliban delegations both offered new proposals for a drawdown of troops, and the differences at this point simply center on how quickly this will happen. Now, U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad didn't elaborate on the talks, but simply continued to back Afghan government calls for all sides to disarm quickly and end the war. All sides probably not meaning the United States. Over in Iraq, the notorious mercenary firm Blackwater is training thousands of ISIS terrorists in the Washington-occupied Ain al-Assad base at Al-Anbar province. This is being reported in the Lebanese media. So it was reported that Blackwater, along with other security firms, has returned to Iraq after Washington's heavy pressures on Baghdad to issue a relevant license. So according to the report, a source close to the U.S. Charge d'Affaires in Iraq, Judy Hood, said that Blackwater has transferred the U.S. military equipment from Jordan to western Al-Anbar province in full coordination with Ain al-Assad Air Base, adding that the company is now training the terrorists in the base. So looks like we're still mucking about over there in Iraq. Okay. Over in North Korea, satellite images show a smoke trail of a Friday rocket launch by North Korea that appears to be a short-range missile. And there was only one rocket trail and appeared to be basically a test. An U.S. official was on CNN saying the launches appear to have been both MLRS, which is multiple launch rocket systems, and what looked like a possible short-range ballistic missile. And of course, this basically underscores the fact that Trump's summits to North Korea really did not work out all that well. And once again, 2 U.S. warships have sailed through the South China Sea, a move that is angering Beijing. And this move comes just a day after Donald Trump threatened China with even more tariffs as part of the ongoing trade war. So China says the waterway is part of its territorial waters. Washington insists the sea is open to international transit under the principle of freedom of navigation. So these 2 ships were the U.S. guided missile destroyers Preble and Chung-Hu, and they traveled within 12 nautical miles of Govan and Johnson Reefs in the Spratly Islands. So China has slammed this move, saying it is a violation of its sovereignty, and it is a provocation, and that's exactly what it is. Now, Commander Clay Doss, who's a spokesman for the 7th Fleet, said that the innocent passage was to challenge excessive maritime claims and preserve access to the waterways as governed by international law. So now over in China, Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang said the relevant actions of the U.S. warships violated China's sovereignty and undermined peace, security, and good order in the relevant sea areas. So let's turn on down to Venezuela, because something interesting is developing there. There is a schism opening up inside the White House between Trump and Bolton/Pompeo on the military option against Venezuela. And Trump is openly contradicting his national security team. They're pushing for a military intervention, and Trump came on out and said that he, in his phone call with Vladimir Putin, shared the goal of a peaceful end to the crisis in Venezuela. And Trump said he's not looking at all to get involved in Venezuela, other than he'd like to see something positive happen. And I feel the same way. We want to get some humanitarian aid. Right now, people are starving. Now, Trump's reference to Russia's hands-off approach towards Venezuela is in sharp contrast to the insistence by Mike Pompeo that Russia is part of the problem in Caracas. And then he went on back to that claim that was made earlier last week that Maduro was about to flee Venezuela until Russia persuaded him to stay. Now, that's already been denied both by Russia and by Maduro. But we're seeing quite a few of these stories, this one's in Fort Russ, talking about there is this divide on Venezuela. And it's really going to tell us who's really in charge of the administration here. Because apparently, Trump is already starting to think about 2020 and understands more wars are going to have a negative impact on his public image and his campaign. Because remember, back in 2016, he campaigned on pulling out of these wars and avoiding these foreign entanglements. And a lot of his base, a lot of his supporters are very upset that we seem to be stuck in more war and more war and more war. And Trump may be realizing it's time to start, the 2020 campaign by making good on some of the 2016 promises. Now, complicating the issue is Guaido is out there saying he's considering asking for the U.S. military to intervene in Venezuela. And, of course, Pompeo and Bolton are saying all options are still on the table. And Guaido is stating in a BBC on the interview, it is responsible to evaluate the possibility of international intervention. I, as the president in charge of the national parliament, will evaluate all options if necessary. So we can see what's going to happen here. Guaido's going to say, we need you to intervene. Pompeo and Bolton are going to get out there and say, look, he's asking for help. How can we turn him down? This poor guy is asking for our assistance here. We can't say no. So that's where they're going with this one. Pompeo also came out on ABC's This Week saying that he refuses to promise to consult with Congress before attacking Venezuela. And that is so unconstitutional because only Congress has the authority to declare war. So there's a major constitutional issue here. So we're going to see what's going to happen there. Story coming out of Sputnik News, analysts are saying that Guaido really has no political or socially holistic project for Venezuela. It's just going to be a power grab, and then he's going to do what his masters in Washington, D.C. and Big Oil tell him to do. It's the same pattern we've seen in all these other countries, whether it was Iran in 1953 or Chile in 1973. We have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And before we go to the phones, there's a story just now coming in. Apparently, this is going back to Syria. Syrian militants fired 36 rockets at Russia's Khmeimim air base in 2 attacks today. Both were repelled by the air defenses. No damage was done, and airstrikes were launched in response. So it is really heating up over there. Okay, let's go to the phones here. Art off the grid, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just got in and just kind of getting tuned in a little bit late here, so I don't know if you brought this up yet, but have you heard about Katrina Pearson and her Twitter attacks against Ilhan Omar?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, apparently the story is out in Haaretz.com, and I don't know how credible, people can say Haaretz is, but apparently Katrina Pearson is now going after Ilhan Omar on Twitter this past Sunday, claiming over a video of rocket fire supposedly fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip. But it turns out, if we're to believe the story, this is actually a video from 2015 of Ukrainian fire against Russian-backed separatists. Now, here is my problem. We've had for, better part of 3 years now, Donald Trump on this fake news attack. So what I'm wondering is, Donald Trump, are you going to now criticize Ms. Pearson for fake news, or are you just going to run with this one and just take a page out of the Democrat playbook? What do you think, Mike?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's absolutely no question that missiles were flying through the skies over Gaza and Israel over the last weekend, and why they didn't just use a video of that. Maybe they're just being lazy and they just go back to the stock library over and over again. But it isn't fake news that there was, in fact, a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians over the weekend.
Okay, well, I mean, I know we've heard the stories, the past couple of days about that, but it just seems mighty odd to me, as you said. Why would they be pulling an old 2015 video? What would be the reason for that, and why? If you don't need to, why? It makes no sense to me. I really don't get it. But anyway, I appreciate your thoughts.
One thing that occurs to me off the top of my head is that it's been very difficult for journalists to get information in and out of the Gaza Strip, and it may be that nobody got the missiles on video. And they said, well, let's just go back and use another video. It could be something as innocent as that. Anyway, thanks an awful lot, Art. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. Getting on back to Venezuela. CNN, speaking of fake news, basically came on out and claimed that the Venezuelan citizens chose coup leader Juan Guaido over the current president Nicolas Maduro in the January elections. And in a report yesterday, CNN wrote, pressure is mounting on Maduro to step down following elections in January in which voters chose opposition leader Juan Guaido over him for president. There's only a slight problem. Venezuela did not hold elections in January, and Guaido definitely did not win them. He just tried to seize power by force in January with U.S. backing, and then again in April. Both coup attempts have failed, and Maduro remains president with support of millions of Venezuelans who still back him. But CNN actually came on out there and tried to sell the American people that there had actually been elections in Venezuela last January that Guaido had won. I mean, talk about propaganda. And then CNN wonders why their ratings are so bad. Ron Paul is out there saying he's concerned that there could be a false flag provocation to justify war in Venezuela, and he's absolutely right about that, especially if Pompeo and Bolton are at odds with Trump. If Trump doesn't really want to go to war in Venezuela, we understand even the Pentagon is reluctant to get caught up in that quagmire. So Bolton and Pompeo might try and gin something up. Oh my goodness, Venezuela has attacked our base at something, and get it going that way. And with all this talk about, Iran getting ready to do something, there could be a false flag over there. False flags are a very common feature of history. You weren't supposed to know about that, but now you all do. False flags are used to start wars and bring about dictatorships. Okay. We got to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, welcome back to our show. We just got a listener email saying I'd have more trust in gas station sushi than anything from CNN. And I guess that's an opinion being shared by more and more Americans every single day. All right, we've got callers waiting online, so let's start with Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Yeah, I'm a little upset because I hear a lot of people saying that Michael Cohen is going to a country club because he's Jewish. That has nothing to do because he's Jewish. It has nothing to do with it. The man is going to lose his freedom, okay? He's going to miss his family. His family is going to miss him. And people should stop making, those suggestions because he's Jewish. He's going to a country club. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, Michael, it is so obvious that Trump is not in charge because if he was in charge, he would have got rid of Bolton and the Secretary of State because it seems like they're the ones that's calling the shots.
Yes.
And the thing with going after Iran or Persia, Trump is, again, he's a puppet to Israel, for Israel, because I think he knows, he's not that stupid, that by going into Iran or even threatening Iran, and he's going to be running for president next year, no way in hell will he get reelected. And especially if he's putting tariffs on China again.
Yeah, that's a bad move. We're going to talk about that during the economics section. I mean, it slammed the stock market down, and they got it almost back to break even by the end of the market trading today. But yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of bad decision making in this administration.
Well, do you think it's because Trump is allowing other people to manipulate him, or the fact that he just can't do things because he might be blackmailed, or maybe some things will come out regarding the Russian situation? I don't know what's going on, but on one thing I do know, and I am not a Trump fan, if he continues in this particular pattern, he is not going to get reelected, even if he wants to get reelected.
Well, he's planning on obviously running on the economy because the corporate media is propagandizing everybody that the economy is doing really, really well. There are reasons to doubt that. We'll be talking about that later in the show. But again, yeah, we're going to find out with Venezuela just who is really calling the shots. And again, there's this White House insider who's saying that Trump is planning a war with Iran this autumn, and it will involve a ground invasion and possibly even the use of tactical nuclear weapons.
That would destroy the economy. Because oil prices would double, and
yes,
people are really going to suffer. And plus, food prices will go up.
Yes. Well, food prices are going to go up anyway because of the massive flooding in the Midwest and up in Canada, the toxification of the Gulf of Mexico, Fukushima, the swine flu epidemic is decimating the pork market. There are going to be food shortages, and that may very much work to undermine Trump's claims of a good economy next year.
Right. Well, Michael, you take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Jim, and we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Make America radiate again. Something's going on here, Mike. Jesus. Yeah, there's got to be two Trumps. There's got to be, because I just don't get it. He's manipulating the stock market on one hand, and then he says, oh, we're not planning on doing anything in Venezuela. But then John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. Will this guy take charge and ownership already as being the president? Does he know he's the president of the United States?
Well, I'm sure he knows he's the president, and he's probably very happy about that. But it does seem like he just wants to bask in that title and the glory and go out to the rallies and let the bureaucracy run the country behind his back. And we've heard from multiple sources before that as far as Trump is concerned, Bolton is in charge of foreign policy.
I didn't vote for Bolton.
Neither did I.
I voted, we voted for somebody who was supposed to be, Mr. Businessman, Mr. Art of the Deal. That's what we voted for. We're not getting that. And
no, we voted for the guy who was. We voted for the guy who was going to get us out of these military entanglements. We voted for the guy who was going to make vaccines safe. We voted for the guy who was going to make our elections honest and transparent. We voted for the guy who was going to put Hillary in prison. We voted for the guy who was going to find out why prescription medications are so expensive, and medical care as a whole is so expensive in this country compared to other countries. And we didn't get the Trump we voted for.
I'm still waiting for a wall, Mike.
Yep.
I don't understand. How can you, if you're the president of the United States, you just can't put people, you do the foreign policy, I'll be doing it. What does he do all day besides Twittering? It's 24 hours in a day. They say he don't get no sleep, but what are you doing all those hours per day? You should be doing some research on foreign policy. You should be doing research on this, on the economy and how, things work. He's not. And Mike,
no, he isn't.
25% tariffs. You'll lose a trade war, people. People don't realize that. This is not capitalism. He's manipulating the markets now. It's like the same with using the dollar as a weapon.
Yes.
At this point, and Europe's moving away now.
Yes.
They're saying, well, they're still going to trade with Iran.
Yes.
And and Trump's a businessman. You would think he'd be saying, hey, Iran, you got beautiful Persian rugs and a lot of pistachios and a lot of other things. Why don't you trade with us instead of doing this? He's not at all.
Well, again, you need to understand that the agenda behind all of these wars, and that includes Venezuela, is that's foreign demand for U.S. dollars is plummeting, and that's the only thing, that foreign demand is the only thing holding up the value of the dollar. And so the goal of all of these wars, and Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this years ago, the idea was for the U.S. to gain control of all these oil-producing nations in the Middle East, and Venezuela's just been added onto the list as well, to make sure they were sold only for U.S. dollars. So other countries would have to come to the United States and either bring us manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for ink and paper notes with which to buy their oil. Or they would have to borrow those dollars from us at interest.
Mike, you had a caller Friday. I don't know how much time I got left. She was from Texas. She sounds like she's a pretty bright woman, but she said Trump had a heart. How do you know? You don't live with Trump. You don't know Trump.
True.
You know Trump cheated on his wife with at least two women. So if he had a heart, he wouldn't have cheated on his wife once. So Trump. We don't know Trump, who the hell this guy is. Even though we voted for him. So people got to stop putting their faith in a human being that's flawed. I want to see results. I'm not getting results. That's the bottom line. We're not getting results.
That's exactly right.
And let me tell you, we got a destiny. You could be on the left side of the road or the right side of the road. We're actually heading in the middle part of the road, and it's just this war agenda that's gonna take us out permanently.
Yeah.
This can't go on. All these carrier groups moving around like chess pieces on a chessboard. How much money they spend a day on these things? $1 million to run an aircraft carrier per day?
Oh, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that.
But in the meantime, the Chinese are building stuff around the world. They're building their own infrastructure up. And
Yes.
Russia is building their infrastructure up. That's why they're only putting $30 billion into their military. What are we doing here in this country to build our infrastructure up right now? Nothing. They're not even talking about it anywhere on the news or nothing.
Well, they were talking about it a week ago with this proposal for a $2 trillion infrastructure package, but we're already hearing word that it's going to go nowhere. It was just for public consumption. We're in a wartime economy, and that's the absolute truth of the matter here. We're in a wartime economy. Every single penny generated by this economy that doesn't go to basically keeping the workers alive, goes to the war machine. And the Pentagon is still asking for more.
Like I said, Mike, at the end of the year, if Trump doesn't start giving us results, I don't want to see no more wars because then he's a one-termer, okay? I want to know who lives by the San Diego border. I want to see some wall being built. I want to see footage of the wall.
Yes.
50 miles of wall should have been built already, okay?
Oh, more than that.
Security. It's a national security issue, Mike. They could have used the Army Corps of Engineers to do this already. It's May. It's May, people, of 2019, for crying out loud.
Yes, it is.
Okay? All right, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again, and be fully on war. So, getting on back down to Venezuela. Sputnik interviewed journalist Nick McWilliam, and basically he came on out and said that the Venezuela crisis is not about U.S. regional, not about democracy, it's about U.S. regional dominance. Well, it always is. I mean, the United States has overthrown something like 25, 30 governments since the end of World War II, always saying we have good intentions, we're going to bring these people democracy, and not once has a true functioning democracy appeared. It's always a dictatorship with trappings of democracy like rigged elections. So apparently there is going to be a meeting face-to-face between Mike Pompeo and Sergei Lavrov, and Lavrov is already out there saying that these U.S. actions toward Venezuela are they're against international law. This is unprecedented. And he noted that it's typical of Washington to always tell the rest of the world that they wage all these wars on good intentions. We did good things. We went into Iraq to get those weapons of mass destruction. We went into Syria because Assad was gassing his own people, and on and on and on and on. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Dave in Delaware, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Doing good.
Hey, that's cool. Hey, I just wanted to call in about the war in Venezuela.
So go ahead.
Oh yeah, remember you said something about the remember the Avatar movie with it was like the predictive programming where they said in Venezuela it was like some hard bush or something like that.
Yeah.
What
Kind of
movie
makes
was
your
that?
hair stand up.
What movie was that?
That was the movie Avatar.
Oh yeah. I remember Dustin from New Jersey, the last caller.
Yes.
He seems so worked up all the time. I don't know why. He's like he gets real excited, Mike. It kind of messes the show up every time you take a call from him.
Well, I disagree with that because, I mean, these are very dark times and people should be getting worked up. I wish we had more Dustins out there. Part of the problem we have right now is so many of the American people are just seem to be so accepting of all of this. And,
Right.
I mean, back during Vietnam, the American people were very upset about what was going on and ultimately forced the government to get the heck out of Vietnam.
You're painting with a broad brush, Mike. It's not everybody that's just acting like Dustin from New Jersey. That's all, come on, Mike, come on. No, we all know who it is, the nose behind the curtain, and you're always scared to say who it is. Remember the Sackler family?
Yeah, I remember the Sackler family, and I remember, we know that Israel is definitely pushing on the United States for the invasion in Iran. That story we reported earlier where the United States is now going to evaluate bilateral relations with other nations based on their attitudes toward Israel, that is a dead giveaway to me that our entire government has in fact been subverted by Israel.
You know what I'm going to do, Mike? You know what I'm going to do? I'm
What?
going to vote. I'm going to support Tulsi Gabbard now. That's what I'm going to do
Okay.
today, right?
Okay.
Here, right? We're going to vote for another politician, right? She's anti-Second Amendment. And what else is she against, Mike?
I'd have to go back to her website and refresh my mind. The reason that I like her is that she has fought she didn't fight. She was a medic in a combat zone, which is why she's anti-war. And I even begin to like.
So what do you think she's going to do when she gets into office? Do you think she's going to keep all these promises like Trump did?
Probably not. Probably she's going to get, first of all, I doubt she's going to get into office because of her anti-war stance. And yeah, the problem is that the person in the White House just doesn't have that much control any longer. Certainly in the case of Donald Trump, he is surrounded by his advisors who are feeding him information to get him to decide what they want him to decide. We've heard from inside the White House that they'll prepare reports for him, which he won't even read. He'll just say, just give me the summary. What does this say?
Okay. And then Justin from New Jersey is going to give him to the end of the year now. Till he makes
Well, Dustin's being more generous than I am because I've given up on Trump.
So, right? He's going to give him to the end of the year then again now, right? And then you guys are going to push another candidate. Who else? And then you said you would support Bernie Sanders. You're like Ann Coulter, and you both have like Adam's apples, right?
Yeah, well, thank you for that personal observation, Dave, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'll try to keep it simple. Yeah, well, we're all against greed. Let's say that. Yeah, I think Trump, this is for Dustin, we are his tower of the American people. That's how I see it. And I saw the weather getting cold, and I saw Donna Brazile coming in, and I saw what was going to happen to Ron Paul and the rewrites, and the voting, and even 10 days later, they're going to start counting the votes all over again. I saw stuff for Alex Jones. I work with the police. I'm a remote viewer, Dustin, and I lend my hand at this because it gives me life and I enjoy it.
Okay, Sherry, I'm sorry to do this to you. We got to let you go and take another commercial break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, that Dave guy was kind of an unsavory character.
Yeah, I'm getting emails about him already.
Yeah, picking on Dustin, you know where he's going with that, right? I mean, come on.
Yes.
So, these different candidates that you have wanting to run, in the primaries to be President of the United States, they were drawing attention. That guy was drawing attention to Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders, like that fella. I mean, he was basically shooting for universal health care, right, Mike?
Well, that was one of the things, but Bernie Sanders was running on a socialist platform, which Wall Street is not happy about. The money junkies want to keep the money that they've siphoned out of the American public. And the whole point of socialism is that the wealth collected at the top gets recirculated back down to the bottom somehow.
Yeah, and obviously the way that it's being done is with taxes. But I live in Canada, so we have this universal health care, if you want to call it that. There are long wait times, Mike, and
Yep.
there are. And
Well, there are long wait times down here. That's the reason Claire's back, has become a chronic issue. It was literally 3 months before she got in to see a doctor. 3 months with a fractured vertebra, and she couldn't get in to see somebody.
Oh.
So, don't tell me about Canada's long wait times.
oh, well, you're retired now, like officially, like 65 and over, right?
Officially, I'm retired. Unofficially, we're never going to be able to kick back here, and
Yeah, I understand.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is, it took so long for your wife to have, some decent health care. It was because of the fact you're retired.
Yeah, that was her opinion as well, that we just don't count anymore. We're on Medicare and a supplemental, yeah, we're not priority patients.
So is that the kind of health care that America wants, that sort of health care?
I'm
where I'm
not
going.
sure what kind of health care America wants, but I know that much of America doesn't like the health care we've got, which is just hideously expensive, and especially after that disaster of Obamacare. Right now, bankruptcy is the leading, medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country.
Yeah, I know that. It's been like that for a long time. The tricky thing with healthcare is, with privatized healthcare, you have all these people making a bunch of money off of cash you're giving them that's supposed to actually go into healthcare, right?
Yes.
And in socialized healthcare, you have a bunch of money going into a system that's making a bunch of people rich that are supposed to be working for you. So it's kind of the same, but a little bit different.
Well, we could look at some other nations' models to sort of find out something that might actually work. What we had in this country worked before Nixon signed the Health Maintenance Organization Act, which is what turned medical care from being about medical care into just another for-profit center. Anyway, Al, got to let you go for station break. We'll be right back after these few minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing Joe. So, all right, back to the news. So we're talking about this upcoming meeting between Mike Pompeo and Sergei Lavrov. And Russia is basically out there saying that U.S. plans for regime change in Venezuela are irresponsible and need to be canceled. They're saying we're seeing an unprecedented U.S.-led campaign aimed at toppling the lawful authority in Venezuela. Well, I would hardly use the word unprecedented. We saw it in Iran in 1953. We saw it in Chile in 1973. We saw it in Iraq. We saw an attempt at it and a failure in Syria. We saw another one up in Ukraine. So Russia is correct. Now, I'm glad that Trump and Putin apparently had a productive phone call because Russia is saying they don't want to get involved. Russia doesn't want to get involved in Venezuela. Doesn't mean they won't. I'm sure that Russia didn't want to get involved in Syria, but they did. And back when the U.S. was just cranking up on all of these wars, the Russians basically said their strategy to counter the U.S. exceptionalism would be to create wars of attrition and just grind the United States down, as happened in Vietnam and then later on in Korea. Okay, we've got callers waiting on the line. Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I think Venezuela is over for now. I don't really worry about that, but I am very worried about what's going on with Israel and Iran. And there's a question I want to ask you, and it's something that I think all us people that are trying to avoid war have to think about, and that is, if war comes, what do we do? I mean, do we become conscientious objectors, war protesters? Do we join up? Do we fight? I mean, personally, you don't want to be a member of a country that loses a war. It's a bad place to be. Ask any German. You can see the war clouds on the horizon, and I know me. I'm in the Merchant Marine, and they'll be sending federal marshals to put me on a boat. If it was, submarines or whatever.
Yes.
So I think we all have to think. I hear, and we're all against war, and that's great. But if you look at our history, when they won a war, they just flip a switch, and we're at a war. And look at World War I. They rounded people up and put them in jails for sedition. They passed a law that I think still exists. And I'm kind of curious, what's your plan? Say we stumble into a war with Iran. Do the flags come out, lapel pins? But at the same time, what are you going to do? Wish your country to lose? So it's kind of a very difficult...
I think ultimately the U.S. is going to lose, and it is losing. And we certainly didn't win in Syria. It looks like we're going to leave Afghanistan. We're going to declare that we won, even though we didn't. The Taliban is still there, and we're going to get out of Afghanistan. And I think the reason the Pentagon is rather soft on the idea of going into Venezuela is the realization that despite the fortune that has been poured into the Pentagon, they're starting to run short on supplies for these wars. They're running short on weapon systems, and there's a concern that the U.S. military is already spread way too thin over the entire globe. So as far as when war comes, well, the wars are already here, and I'm already a conscientious objector and a war protester, and I wish more people would be war protesters. But then again, you get on out there and protest the war, the corporate media is going to ignore you. We even saw that all the way back when Iraq was getting cranked up.
Well, no, I got, I was working for the military on boats, and I was doing the 9/11 truth. I lost my security clearance and lost my job because of the 9/11 stuff. So I still can't work for them, and that's, what happens when you want to stand up for what's right. But,
yeah, I know. Been there, done that. Didn't buy the T-shirt. I mean, there have been a few times where I keep saying 20, I guess it's 25 years ago now. I should have just kept my mouth shut about Foster's suicide. And I would have had the career that I was obviously aiming at, would have had a materially successful life, would be looking at a retirement right about now. But this government, the politicians in it, they do have a tendency to just crush down anybody who doesn't go along with the official story. And I'm sorry that you lost your security clearance over the 9/11 Truth movement.
I had my leg broken too on one time in a fight because of it.
Wow, that's really getting out there.
Yeah, no, you get attacked. I had a guy pull a gun on me. I had a guy push me off my motorcycle in Daytona because I had a 9/11 T-shirt. So I had a lot of different things happen to me about 9/11. But I wanted to get back to Venezuela.
Yep.
Just that it's a failure, and the reason it's a failure is because of our heavy-handedness in this. I mean, it's just like in Cuba, it's like in Iran. When we get vindictive, and the people who love to be friendly with America, Venezuelan people, they'd love to get, enjoy the money and the culture and all the exchanges. But we have to be heavy-handed, and then it just builds up the anti-Yankeeism. And that's what keeps Maduro in power. The people there would love prosperity. They would love to not have to, eat dogs or whatever. And whether it's that bad or not might be a lot of baloney too. But it's like Castro. The worst thing, why don't you be there? Be friendly to Maduro and friendly to the Iranians and friendly to Cuba. And that's real diplomacy. And it's the reason that Maduro is still in power is because of our militantism against them. I mean, it's the same way in Cuba, and it's the same way in Iran. We can't just be diplomatic.
Well, in both Cuba and Venezuela, the reality is the people of those countries understand the hardships they're dealing with are not caused by their own government, but by the U.S. government. And from that is where the support for their own government continues to flow. And we certainly saw that under Hugo Chavez. We're seeing it under Maduro. I mean, last year in the Venezuelan elections, he won by a handy margin. And their election had international observers. It was declared to be fair and transparent and as honest as elections get on this planet. But again, the United States has had a long, long history of meddling all across South America, and all the people of South America know it. They've grown up with it. And so when the United States comes on down and says, we're going to come on in and do good things for you, the South Americans know it's a lot of nonsense.
And that's we're getting back to what do you do if we do get in a war? I mean, if we got in a war and we lose, the whole world hates our guts.
Yes.
What's going to happen to the American people is going to be worse than what happened to the Nazis, the Germans, but when the Russians took over, because there's not many.
Let me ask you a question.
Loved it.
Have you ever stopped to think that if the German people had stood up more firmly and against their government said, no, these wars have to stop, that they wouldn't have had to go through the aftermath?
Well, I mean, they tried. I mean, they tried that general's plot against Hitler. They tried to kill Hitler a lot of different times. He just was lucky in that respect. And, you know, I mean, there is like a point in that the German people, really, it's just like the American people at a certain level. We're kind of powerless. I mean, look what we've done. We rose up. We put Trump in, and the war party just keeps going on. You put a Democrat in, the war party keeps going on. You put Bush in, he says, "Oh, no more foreign entanglements." Next thing you know, you get a false flag. The war party goes on. So it's hard to really blame the people at a certain level, and that look at how many people I know that were out on street corners giving out DVDs, and the people I blame are the establishment are the people that I blame, because they control the levers of culture and media, and most people, if I got control of a TV network, I could have people thinking libertarian views and being more a constitutionalist. But the people that control that, the levers of culture and education and all our institutions are just corrupt, and they're all it's like Eisenhower warned us.
Yes,
it's like an octopus. They have all those things. So at the level of like blaming the little guy, it's kind of hard for me to do, But it's the order followers of the little people that I blame.
Yeah, it's the people who go along with what they know to be illegal and immoral acts because of a paycheck is really what it comes down to. And one of the reasons, I mean, I'm opposed to war in general, but one of the reasons I have been so outspoken against the current U.S. military campaigns is because I think ultimately we are going to lose it. We just don't have the money, the manufacturing, the manpower, and certainly not the moral authority to be waging all these wars all across the globe. And that's really the situation that we find ourselves in today, where U.S. military forces are just all over the globe and now looking to possibly go into Venezuela. And sooner or later, the U.S. is going to run out of bullets.
I'm watching them send the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier over, and I'm thinking, I mean, they have missiles now. A carrier is a sitting duck.
Yes.
In the Persian Gulf. And it's kind of a sign of like the real weakness of this country. It's like, yeah, we're brass. We'll send over there to try to intimidate you with a sitting duck aircraft carrier. I mean, and what will happen is they'll sink our carriers. They'll show us up, and then what are we going to probably do is go to nuclear weapons, because we don't accept this defeat well as a country. So,
no, we really don't. We really don't.
So let's hope it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, oh boy.
I think at this point it's inevitable. The people who have been pushing for war all this time, they've already gotten many of the wars they wanted, and it's no secret that Iran was on the top of that list that Wesley Clark blew the whistle on all those years ago.
Yeah, I'm watching what's going on over there a lot more than I'm watching what's going on in Venezuela right now. It could, it's summer too. Spring, summer is when wars start over there. So, it's very scary, really.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very scary. Okay, well, listen, Joe, we're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out now to our Honor affiliates who are rejoining our network. And we're going to go back to the phones to Don in Iowa. Don, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yes. The problem is that with us, what can we do? We have one vote. Who are we going to vote for? I always vote for the person who is seems to be the most peaceful candidate. But none of them are actually peaceful. None of them are. So that's why so many people just don't vote at all.
Yeah.
Trump was.
It's a complete and total waste of time, and it just seems to encourage the bastards. I remember back in 2008, Barack Obama was out there saying, "I will end the wars and bring our kids home." Never happened.
Right. I voted for Obama because he said he'd get out of Iraq. He didn't do it, but and then the next time I didn't vote. I voted a protest candidate. I think I voted for the Libertarian, but that's a farce too. Those guys are just fraud. The Libertarian Party is just frauds anyway. And then this time,
I voted for Trump because he was not Hillary.
Yeah, well, Trump did come across as more of a peace candidate compared to Hillary Clinton. He did.
Yes, he did.
He came across, but none of them are peace candidates. It seems like they get in there and they just kowtow to the Pentagon because they're either afraid they're going to get killed or not. Or I know that, even Obama. One thing about Obama, although he did kind of kowtow to Israel, let them have all the foreign aid they wanted, but when Netanyahu came to see Obama, at least he had a cosmetic kind of at least he acted like he didn't like him, but he'd make Bibi wait out in the waiting room before he'd come and see. He didn't actually actively, blatantly kiss his ass like Trump does.
Yes.
So that was something. But there's nothing we can do now. Somebody complaining about Bernie. Bernie Sanders is a Jew, but I don't think he would kowtow to the country of Israel and Bibi. I don't think he would like Trump is. And,
well, at this point, it's almost irrelevant because Israel has got their talons into so many members of Congress and so many members of our military chain of command and so much of the bureaucracy. It's almost like the Oval Office is quickly becoming an irrelevancy in the way this country operates.
Basically, there's not much we can do. We have one vote. Our vote, there's nobody good to vote for. There never will be. But this guy, McAfee, the computer guy,
yes,
computer security guy,
yes,
he's running now. I saw the interview with him. His slogan is "Don't vote for McAfee" because he's saying "Don't vote." But even though he's running, his slogan is "Don't vote. Nobody should vote." Well, if nobody voted at all, that would be cool. And then what would they do? But McAfee can't. He's running for president, but he can't even enter the country. So it's all kind of a big,
it's just he's taking his campaign as seriously as I took mine back in 2016. So
let's go. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, I'll tell you what's going to get people excited. That one caller was asking before about that, and Dustin, rightly so, is excited. What's going to get this country excited is the D word, draft.
Yes.
And that's probably going to happen.
That'll fire them up. That will definitely fire everybody up.
It's going to Venezuela or Iran, especially Iran, and probably Venezuela too, because the occupation part where the guerrilla war will come in. They're not getting the troops they need right now. They're practically begging for people. They're starting to take from the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
right?
they are. I saw a news story the other day. I mean, they're paying these huge enlistment bonuses just to try, get young people to come on in. And you're right. They have lowered the standards of who they're willing to accept just to keep bodies in those uniforms. But if we're seriously talking about ground invasion into Iran, and especially if we do mix it up with Russia and China, there's going to be a draft. And at that point, the American people, again, just like in Vietnam, at that point, the American people are going to get really angry and say, this has gone on long enough.
Well, if we mix it up with Russia or China, I don't think there's going to be any need for a draft. I don't think this planet is going to be around that long for a draft to even occur. It's because I don't think it's going to stay a ground war very long. But if it's, I believe, Putin's a real 4D chess player. He really knows how to play chess, and he knows judo. He's not going to risk the planet for either of these places. What he's going to do, and he's probably doing already, is arming these countries to the teeth.
Yes.
Weapons to defend themselves, including missiles to shoot down not only planes, but in Iran's case, ships, to shoot down ships. And he's just going to sit back there and he's going to watch. Kind of like we watched when kind of like what we did to the Soviet Union there in Afghanistan.
Yes.
Except to be much more serious. The kind of weapons, especially with Iran, because they have the ability to blow ships out of the water. And that's what I think is going to happen. But that's when the graft is going to come in. They're going to have to. There's no way they're going to have the volunteers. People today, Generation Z and the millennials, for that matter, are spotted up. They don't get their news from the fake news network, from the crap news network, and nothing but crap news. They get it right here from places like you, people on the internet, people like Timmy Dore, InfoWars. There's tons of information around today. The American Vagabond. That's where they're going to get. That's where they get. A lot of them get their news.
All right. Well, Mark, I'm going to have to let you go here. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And over at uns.com, they have an article which the headline just says right out: the U.S. desperately needs a new Secretary of State. And it goes on to basically call him an ignorant warmonger. True, I don't know about ignorant, but he's definitely a warmonger. And they're saying he's masquerading as an American Secretary of State, and he should be arrested for his impersonation of an American government official. And they really uncork on this guy. They don't pull any punches. And says Pompeo cannot possibly be Secretary of State because not even Donald Trump would appoint an idiot to this high position who thinks that Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president the authority to declare war and invade other countries. And apparently Pompeo came out and made that claim. Pompeo said the president has his full range of Article 2 authorities, and I'm very confident that any action we took in Venezuela would be lawful. And of course, that's complete and utter nonsense. Only Congress has the right to declare war. And unfortunately, Congress has abandoned that responsibility. They tried to regain it with that resolution on Yemen. But there is a big problem there. We have devolved into a nation where our head of state can simply say, go wreck that country. And that's not what the United States is supposed to be about. All right, let's turn to the domestic politics here. Story out of the New York Post talking about the FBI spying campaign against Trump and saying it's another reason to investigate former FBI Director James Comey. Now, Trump has labeled it Spygate, but the New York Post is saying it's looking more like Get Smart, or the classic Mad Magazine cartoon Spy versus Spy. You're going to have to be my age to get the reference to Get Smart. It was actually one of my father's favorite TV shows. And it was a comedy about this bumbling intelligence agent and agency. And as we learn more and more about this Spygate operation against the president, you begin to realize there were some very dumb people doing some very dumb things. And this went on for 2 years. And it plagued the Trump White House with all of this news coverage from the corporate media that now turned out to be completely false. Just like when CNN said that Venezuela had elections in January. It's a complete lie. That's what they're paid to do. They're paid all of that money. They get a lot of money. I can't even imagine what it's like to have a salary like that. They do it because they get it because they're good liars. And that's their job. Of course, they're not doing so well these days, which I think is a positive thing. And in response to the other caller was saying, what do we do about the wars and everything? Well, the one thing that we can and are doing is we remove the government and corporate media's ability to lie to the people with impunity. And yes, they're trying to shut us down, and yes, they may shut us down. But do you think the American people are going to go back to just believing what they see on those TV screens? I don't think so. Over at Hillary's land, she's still out there saying that the election was stolen from her, and she's still out there. The blame, she can't let go. You know, why did she lose in 2016? Well, it was Matt Lauer. It was James Comey. It was men being sexist. It was women being sexist. It was voter suppression. It was Citizens United. It was fake news. It was WikiLeaks. It was Facebook. It was the Russians. And today, Jon Stewart found himself added onto that list as well. So Hillary's still out there saying that the 2016 election was stolen from her. Apparently, it's become a cornerstone of all of the speaking tour. An evening with the Clintons, and Saturday night she was out there saying that she's advising candidates about what it's like to have an election stolen. Now, remember, the only evidence of interference in the 2016 election came from the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC, who basically stole the primaries from Bernie Sanders. So on Saturday evening, she acknowledged the state of the economy is looking good, but she still says somebody's got to take Trump out in 2020. By the way, speaking of that speaking tour, the ticket sales have plummeted. Nobody's showing up. When they started on out, the premium seats were originally almost $2,000. Then they got slashed to $1,000. And now, at some of the non-premium seats, secondary sellers are selling the tickets for $10 to $20 just to try and fill the seats. And I'm hoping Hillary's going to look at all those chairs and realize she's not going to have the support to run in 2020. So we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about how the ticket sales have plummeted for the evening with Bill and Hillary Clinton. Apparently Saturday's was the final night, and somebody bought a ticket just to have the privilege to heckle Hillary and basically saying, "You're going to jail, lady." And apparently the audience really kind of liked that. But I noticed that even Fox News was running the story where Hillary is saying that the 2016 election was stolen from her. So that's going to be her big talking point. I think she's still seriously considering stepping in. Once we start to see who the shakeout is in the Democrats. And, you know, we're seeing all these attacks on Joe Biden starting up, and I'm wondering how many of those are being initiated by Hillary supporters. Meanwhile, apparently the meme is already being pushed that Putin will rig the 2020 election for Donald Trump. And that's the buzzword of the day. And apparently this was in response to the fact that he had an hour-long phone call with Putin in which they discussed nuclear de-escalation, Venezuela, North Korea, and the discredited collusion narrative. And apparently Trump was asked point blank if he told Putin not to meddle in the 2020 U.S. election, and Trump said, well, we didn't discuss that. And again, there's no reason to. There is no evidence of significant Russian interference in our 2016 election. The people who interfered with that electoral process was the Hillary campaign and the Democratic National Committee. They cheated Bernie Sanders out of the nomination. Then when it looked like Trump was gaining in the polls, they went on out with all these super delegates. They were trying to hijack the convention. Then they wanted to try and hijack the Electoral College. That's major interference. All right. Apparently, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee tweeted out a poll to its 107,000 followers asking if they want more Supreme Court justices like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or more justices like Brett Kavanaugh. And apparently the expectation was that they were going to get a flood back saying, oh no, we need more like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We need more liberal judges. Didn't work out the way they planned. Kavanaugh got 70% of the votes. So we may be seeing the beginnings of the decline of liberalism. I know they've pushed themselves into almost total, complete control of this country, but there could be a misstep, and they could fall. Now, I don't want to swing all the way back over to hard conservative. I'm kind of a centrist by nature. But some of the stuff that has come out of liberalism lately, like this whole bathroom nonsense, and literally encouraging children to be transgender and go through that medical treatment, that's really, really out there. Speaking of talk about Biden, and of course he's polling at number 1. And so everybody is taking shots at him because he's the man on top of the Democratic candidate pyramid. Over at Vanity Fair, they're reminding everybody about Hunter Biden's $1.5 billion Bank of China deal. And they're saying that this could turn out to be another campaign scandal for Joe Biden. Now, this comes a few days after a New York Times article renewed interest in the revelations exposed in Peter Schweizer's 2018 bestseller, Secret Empires, concerning all the sweetheart deals Hunter Biden's private equity firm secured while his father, Joe Biden, was vice president. We shouldn't be surprised. They're all crooked. They're all in office to make deals and to make money. That's the whole point of being there. That's how they're willing to spend so much money. You think they're in that job for the salary? You're talking about people who will spend $20 million to win a job that pays $150,000 a year. Now, as I mentioned before, CNN came out with an outright lie, claiming that Venezuela had elections in January and that Guaido had won. But CNN and MSNBC, their ratings are plunging. And once you've lost the trust of your audience, it takes a long time to get it back. In fact, what it would take would be a rebranding and a complete change of the staff. Meanwhile, over at CBS News, they're pushing a plan to annihilate free speech online, and they want to implement a disinformation filter that basically will force the official narrative on everyone, which means when you open up your email or your browser or your cell phone or your tablet, there will be nothing there other than the official view. That's dictatorship, by the way. And it is an affront to the First Amendment. And I'm stunned that Donald Trump, after all of his caterwauling about fake news, doesn't seem interested in dealing with this thing. Now, our founding fathers were convinced that the only way to maintain a long-standing, functional, democratic republic was to ensure that America always had a truly free press. And that's why they enshrined that within that First Amendment. But today we have a lot of corporate and social media is being run by these authoritarian leftists who are absolutely convinced that it's perfectly okay to shut down any rival media that challenges their political, cultural, or societal orthodoxies. Now, they claim they're combating disinformation and fake news, but what they're basically doing is they're shutting down the opposing points of view. Now, Thomas Jefferson once said it was the highest duty of every American citizen to keep themselves fully informed so they could make good choices. Well, that's getting harder and harder to do in this day and age. What social media and corporate media want to do is basically feed you only that information that will lead you to decide of your own free will what they want you to decide. That's mind control. That's brainwashing. A lot of people think mind control is rays and tinfoil hats and, medicines in the water. No, it isn't. You control the brain by controlling what it knows. And that's what they're trying to do in this country. Tucker Carlson took on the issue, saying Mark Zuckerberg now controls what political opinions you're allowed to have. And he said, this is not simply censoring opinions, it's prescribing which political opinions Facebook users are supposed to have. And he says it's not unlike the communist Chinese social credit system, but it's controlled by giant corporations with more power than entire countries. Another variation on the theme, again from the New York Post. Mark Zuckerberg's hate ban isn't about safety, it's about his own ego. So last Thursday, Facebook announced that they had deplatformed, permanently banned, Alex Jones, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, Paul Joseph Watson, Paul Nellin, Louis Farrakhan. They're permanently banned from Facebook. They can't start new accounts. Now, Facebook is still taking the position they're a private company, and they're under no legal obligation to provide accounts to figures whose views its executives find to be objectionable. But how far can we go with that? Another little story, this one from Prison Planet. The first rule of Facebook is you don't talk about anyone Mark Zuckerberg doesn't like, or you'll be banned by Facebook. It's not a joke. It's literally their new policy, and they're calling on the president to do something about this. And what really rankles me, this is coming from the same liberals who just screamed bloody murder when a baker refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple, under the idea that the baker had a right to decide who he did and did not do business with. And the liberals said, oh, no, you can't do that. That's completely wrong. We're going to sue you out of business. And then they turn around and say that as far as social media, banning people with unliberal views, double plus ungood, unliberal views, it's perfectly okay because they're a private company. Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg took to Instagram to urge his 31 million followers to repost and share videos of Louis Farrakhan to Facebook and Instagram. So, Snoop is in there with it. All right, let's talk about the economic news, because category of bad idea. The trade talk tensions with China have escalated. Trump is threatening an additional 25% tariff increase on $200 billion worth of goods. This is going to hit May 10th. He announced this just yesterday. And it sent the stock market into a tailspin. S&P futures plummeted. The stock market's own, the Dow opened up something like 400 down, but the PPT was able to sort of goose it back up to minus 66 at the close. Alrighty. Bad idea. Now, the Chinese delegation is saying that despite Trump's threats, they are going to once again meet with U.S. representatives to try and continue the talks about trade barriers. Iran is getting ready to raise their gas exports to Iraq, despite U.S. opposition. We talked about this last week. And they're saying that they will continue to export gas to Turkey, Baghdad, and Basra, with an average of over 40 million cubic meters a day. And this year, gas exports to Iraq will reach more than 30 million cubic meters per day. So it's growing. Over in Europe, Europe is vowing to continue buying Iranian oil, even though the United States has revoked the export waivers. So the foreign ministers of Great Britain, France, and Germany, as well as the EU foreign policy head Federica Mogherini, issued a statement condemning the White House's decision for sanctions and for pulling out of the Iran deal, and vowing once again to abide by the terms of the deal. which meant as long as Iran is following the rules, Europe's going to continue to do business with them. And so we're looking, Trump is setting up a showdown with our allies in Europe. And that could in turn accelerate the de-dollarization of the global financial system. Europe is already at work on their alternative payment system to SWIFT. Just poor quality thinking coming out of that White House, coming out of that entire city here. Story out of UNS.com. Does America have an economy or any sense of reality? And it's going on in talking about, there's a propaganda barrage about the great Trump economy. And we've been being told about the great economy for a decade while the labor force participation rate declined, real family income stagnated, and debt burdens rose. The jobs reports are a fabrication, and the jobs that do exist are lowly paid domestic service jobs such as waitresses and bartenders and healthcare and social assistants. What has kept the American economy going is the expansion of consumer debt, not higher pay from higher productivity. People are borrowing to put food on the table. So another little article, this from Activist Post. I dare you to tell me the economy is booming after reading this list of 19 facts about our current economic performance. Starting with number one. In April, U.S. auto sales were down 6.1%. That's the worst decline in 8 years. The number of mortgage applications has fallen for 4 weeks in a row. We've just witnessed the largest crash in luxury home sales in 9 years. Existing home sales have now fallen for 13 months in a row. In March, total residential construction spending was down 8.4% from a year ago. U.S. manufacturing output was down 1.1% during the first quarter of this year. And that's the reason why we really were not positioned for a trade war with China. We have to bring our manufacturing back. Farm incomes are falling at the fastest pace since 2016. Wisconsin dairy farmers are going bankrupt in record numbers. Apple iPhone sales are falling at a record pace. Big surprise for them. They thought they were going to be the world leader. They're now in third place. And perhaps a little payback for Zuckerberg, Facebook's profits have declined for the first time since 2015. CVS is going to be closing 46 stores. Office Depot is closing 50 locations. I understand that Subway is closing 1,000 of their stores. Overall, U.S. retailers have announced more than 6,000 store closings so far in 2019. And that means we've already surpassed the total for retail closings for all of last year. So we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economy, and we're talking about reasons to doubt all this propaganda about the booming Trump economy. And apparently there's a new study out that has discovered that 137 million Americans have experienced medical financial hardship in the past year. And again, that was something that Trump campaigned on in 2016, trying to find out why medical care in the United States was so much more expensive than the identical medical care you can get in other countries. Let's see, credit card charge-offs at U.S. banks have risen to the highest level in 7 years. Credit card delinquencies have risen to the highest level in almost 8 years. And right now we have more than 500,000 American homeless right now. Homelessness in New York is the worst it's ever been. And nearly 102 million Americans do not have a job right now. That number is worse than it was at any point during the last recession. But hey, folks, at least the stock market is doing okay. Well, not so much today. Meanwhile, another telling indicator, it's boom times for auction houses as American farmers go bankrupt. And so it looked like more and more farmers, and we're talking not corporate farms, but the small family-owned farms, they're filing for bankruptcy, and they're closing up shop, they're quitting. They're going to sell the property, and they're liquidating the machinery and the land. And according to Reuters, they're hearing this from like a dozen farm equipment auction houses. Now, I grew up at a time when family farms were a very common thing. And that was just the way it worked. And you went basically from the field to the table. The food was very, very fresh. And today, unfortunately, food production is dominated by corporations who pour chemicals all over their product and then ship it across a couple of time zones until it finally gets to your supermarket. Let's see. We already talked about the construction spending is down here. So, this is a very insightful article, and it came out of uns.com. They do a lot of good work over there. And it says, basically, here's your geopolitical quiz for the day. Two countries are embroiled in a ferocious rivalry. One country's meteoric growth has put it on a path to become the world's biggest economic superpower, while the other country appears to be slipping into irreversible decline. Which country will lead the world into the future? Well, that really is a good summation. It is very obvious the United States is a nation in decline. They made a lot of the same mistakes as the former Soviet Union, bankrupting itself for its military spending and ignoring its industry, its agriculture. And at this point, I agree, it's irreversible. As long as we have our current political system and this military-industrial complex, they'll drive this nation into absolute ruin just so they can buy another bomb. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And skipping back to the domestic politics here, this story just came on in from Reason.com. Ron Paul was being interviewed by Russia Today talking about this lineup for the Democratic presidential primaries. And he basically came on out and he said that he likes Tulsi Gabbard the best. In fact, he said, quote, Tulsi Gabbard is by far the very, very best. Now, I don't know if it represents a formal endorsement, but it certainly is going to help Tulsi's campaign to have the Ron Paul supporters are going to be looking at her very closely now. Getting on back to the economy, the U.S. ambassador is unleashing yet more sanction threats against the Nord Stream 2 participants. And U.S. envoy to Berlin and vocal critic of the project, Richard Grenell, was on Focus News magazine and said that Russian gas transported via the Nord Stream 2 pipeline may result in sanctions for European contributors. See, it's all about the oil and where it goes and whose pipelines carry it. That's what this is all about. It's not ideological, it's purely economic. It's the U.S. wanting to keep control of the global economy, and their grip is slipping. And you can almost feel the panic. Okay, over at Tesla, there's another lawsuit, and it was a fatal Model X crash back in March of last year. And the family of the man who was killed in this autopilot crash is suing Tesla for, quote, beta testing on live drivers, end quote. And the lawsuit is basically saying that the state-of-the-art Tesla lacked safety features such as an automatic emergency braking system, which the family says it's available on less expensive vehicles. Apparently, the Tesla X left a travel lane and struck something. And I don't know about you. I'm never, ever going to be interested in having a car with an autopilot. I don't even use the cruise control. As I mentioned before, Apple is not doing very well. Wasn't all that long ago it looked like Apple would overtake Samsung to get the biggest chunk of the global smartphone market, but now they have been pushed into third place by Huawei. And complicating situation is apparently experts have analyzed the iPhone and discovered the battery doesn't last as long as Apple claims. In fact, Apple is exaggerating the battery life by up to 51%. Okay, this is a topic we've talked about before, and this is also from UNS. And it says, America needs a debt jubilee. And the article basically talks about one of the values of studying ancient history and archaeology, because what you find out is that in those ancient times, they were actually more advanced and more humanitarian than our own. They were more advanced because the rulers were focused on ensuring society's longevity by maintaining a livable balance between debtors and creditors. And of course, it's been downhill ever since then. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, the Jubilee was an occasional celebration in which all debts were erased. And reports are it was a wild party where for the one day, the masters and the slaves would trade places. And of course, the slaves who are now masters, of course, would be very careful because the next day it would go back to the other system. But basically, they would erase the debt for everybody and just reset the system all over again so it could keep going. And it was a really good idea. And then, of course, the money junkies said, no, we can't have this debt. Debt is holy. Debt is sacrosanct. We can't do this. And the world has been drowning in debt ever since. And debt can bring down countries. It has in the past. Global debt could bring down the global financial system. Turning to immigration and refugees, the Border Patrol is now warning that children are being rented to pose as being parts of a family unit to get across the border, then they're recycled back to the country of origin. So there's a lot of fakery going on down. And that explains why so many of these DNA tests that they're doing to see if these kids really belong with these adults have come back negative. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, Trump just did something I agree with. He did a good thing. That's an attaboy, Donald Trump. You get a cookie. And apparently they've reactivated a computer check that warns employers when their new employees are most likely illegal immigrants. They're firing this up, this national program, to exclude illegals from jobs. With 102 million legal American citizens out of work, I think this is a good idea. So the Democrats and the open borders lobbyists are erupting in fury, saying, no, this is bad. These people have a right to be here and to take jobs. But apparently, the so-called no-match letter warns employers that their employees' claimed Social Security numbers are suspect, and so allows the employers to minimize their legal risks by quietly firing the employees who do not have a right to work. Now, this program did exist at one time, but it was stopped by President Obama because it turned out to be very effective at warning employers that workers were illegal immigrants. Over in Germany, Angela Merkel is defending, still, her disastrous migrant policy. She had to do a speech up at Brandenburg. And Germans were initially supportive of the open door policy. They thought it was just going to be a few people. It certainly wasn't. It's been an unprecedented social upheaval. So 4 years after this open door migrant policy, Merkel is again forced to defend it as she addressed her supporters in Brandenburg. However, in the back, Germany has now halted granting asylum to Syrians en masse. Up until now, anybody who was Syrian got across the border, you got amnesty, you're in. But the German Office for Migration and Refugees has been pushing back asylum decisions in recent weeks. Apparently, migration authorities are postponing applications, mainly of people from Syria. So they're putting the brakes on over there. Meanwhile, over in Austria, apparently Austrian citizens are basically voicing their outrage in their local media, saying that the refugees have become such a problem. They feel like foreigners in their own country. And people are out there saying mass migration had changed Austria to the point where the Austrians are feeling highly alienated. They're talking about moving just to be able to live in peace again. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael, good day to you. I don't know if you had a chance to you ever watch One American News Network, Michael, but today they were talking about ICE as being deputized to arrest these illegals. They're going after the most wanted of them. And now they're going to start using the police forces in a lot of these cities on the border. What? Michael, One American News, excuse me, every hour on the hour, like I told you, they give immigration figures. And from last week till now, I looked at how much it's costing, and it looks like it's gone up like $400 million in a week.
I would not be surprised. You know, they're estimating we're coming up on 30 million illegals inside this country.
Correct. Well, One American News, Michael, has it at 27, almost 27 million now.
Okay.
That's every hour they report on that. One American News Network. But what was fascinating that is they were talking about. The one guy was talking that they should have done this years ago, where the president had the power as the executive officer. Which I'll tell you, you're right about Trump on some things, Michael. I got to admit. I mean, as far as immigration, he should have had these politicians arrested, these mayors, these commissioners that are pushing a sanctuary city. Donald Trump has the power as executive lead officer of our country to have these people arrested for breaking the law. I don't know why these people are not being arrested. I did see a judge got arrested in Massachusetts. I'm sure you know about that case.
I saw that one.
But till I see Donald Trump, and I don't know, this election got me a little perplexed. I might even not sit out this damn thing. Because if he's not going to start arresting these people for breaking immigration laws, these politicians like Schumer, Pelosi, and she's worth $42 million, Michael.
Yes.
And why are they putting a couple $100,000 on her property over there in San Francisco?
Oh, because Pelosi is a NIMBY.
How much her husband's worth.
You know, Nancy Pelosi is a NIMBY, not my backyard.
Right. The husband's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, her husband. And I'm saying to myself, I still haven't seen Donald Trump or any of the Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, say we're going to arrest these Democrats for aiding and abetting and using sedation against our nation. Sedation against the nation for an illegal invasion and a collusion of our country. It's costing, when OAN reports every hour on the hour, Michael, every hour on the hour, how much immigration is costing, and no other network will touch that. You don't see Fox News doing that. You don't see any of these other networks wanting to touch that, what OAN does. Every hour on the hour about the money it's costing, the sheer number, like you say, close to 30 million illegals. California, Michael, has 7 million illegals. Close to 7 million. And that's not just from Central America, that's from all over. China, they're coming from all over the place.
Yes.
The women from China are having babies in California like crazy. You heard about that?
Yes. Well, it's that whole anchor baby thing. If you sneak across the border and pop out a child, you get to stay. It's a totally screwed up system.
Well, Michael, what it is, it's an invasion, and it's actually the asphalt's going to be telling the gasoline what to do pretty soon.
Yes.
That's exactly what's going to happen here. And until you get real laws on the books that need to be enforced, and until the President of the United States, Donald Trump, starts arresting these even the lawyers, a lot of these lawyers are colluding. Until you start having something done about the illegal aliens being given sanctuary, what does sanctuary mean? I don't understand. Well, sanctuary for what? For a bank robber? Or people who still can't pay their bills? Steal food out of a store? Do they get sanctuary? Because they can't pay their bills? I don't get it. Look at how many people lost their home in the housing crisis, Michael.
Yes.
Did they get to keep their homes? Or could they went to a sanctuary city and got a free house? Hello?
Yeah, I know, it's out of control.
It's absolutely out of control. And until I see President Trump say enough is enough, and, as we're speaking right now in Israel, they have their military on the border because they're shooting rockets into Israel.
Well, there's a ceasefire in place on that, which so far seems to be holding for a while.
Yes, right. Supposedly it's holding. But until, and me and you agree on one thing. We don't need to be going into Venezuela. If anything, we need to put our troops on our border.
I would agree, and get the wall built.
Money over to Venezuela. Let Venezuela handle their own cash. Our problem is at our southern border.
I mean, we're talking about all these wars here. I mean, if we can't secure our southern border, what's to prevent, well, for example, Venezuela from sending their forces over here and just coming into the middle of the country to cause all kinds of mayhem?
Absolutely, Michael. Great point. So, you know what? Till I really see in the next week or two, Trump really say, you know what? I'm going to seal that border, and all these people who are supporting Sanctuary City get arrested. I don't believe it. I don't believe anything. I think it's all a scam, and they're just trying to change the demographic of this nation. That's exactly what this is.
That's exactly what's going on. They're changing the demographic. And part of that, of course, is we're seeing this open, tolerated animosity toward white people.
Absolutely. Michael, and in Florida here, our governor just signed a bill. This is not a sanctuary state. There'll be no sanctuary cities anywhere in the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis signed that bill Friday. But I will tell you this, all these people, now listen to what I'm saying, all these people from New York, New Jersey, all those liberal states in the Northeast, because of cold weather and all that, they're all coming to Florida, and they're bringing their liberal policies with them. And you know what? They have a plan to try to take over the Panhandle with all these people.
Yes.
They're bringing these people from New York, New Jersey into the Panhandle because they know what the Panhandle of Florida usually votes for. They want strong borders. They want to support strong conservative policies. They're not for 9 months later having an abortion and kill the baby and saying it's not murder and all the other stuff they're embracing with the left as far as LGBT, what's going on all over the place. I don't want to go there on that, but, if you say something about that, you're considered a right-wing racist or radical.
Yes.
Because, you believe in the Bible. So if you believe in the Bible now, you are literally considered a racist radical, Michael,
yes.
And you know that.
Yep.
The people who believe in the New Testament and the Old Testament are mainly the New Testament. They're considered radicals. So
the country's tearing itself apart. It's really tearing itself apart. As I said earlier in the show, we may be beginning to see the pendulum slim backward. This pendulum that goes between liberal and conservative, it swings back and forth. I've seen several of it over my lifespan here. And the liberals pushed really hard to try and get a total lock on the nation. But I think there is going to be a pushback. I think conservatives and even people who don't really identify as either liberal or conservative, they are fed up with all of this nonsense, whether it's the LGBT, a lot of strong opinions on this idea of being able to abort babies right up to the moment of birth. That's triggered a lot of very strong feelings. And of course, the open borders situation.
Absolutely, Michael. And Michael, one more thing. They're not reporting all these illegals. You know how much it costs medically a year to support these people who need medical care?
Yes.
These illegals? It's $1.4 billion a year. I believe it's higher than that, but that's the figure I saw on one of these news stations. It was for all the illegals that are in our country to help them get medical care. The taxpayer of these countries paying $1.4 billion, and I believe it's a lot higher than that.
It could very well be with the cost of medical care, but I mean, you have to wonder how many of those 26, 27 million illegal immigrants came into this country needing medical care. How many of them came into this country being told they were going to get this free medical care for whatever ailed them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's unbelievable. And, you know, until I see President Trump actually say enough is enough, and the ones that came here, you know what? They had a good thing in 2012. Oh, Obama, I don't remember if you remember this. Barry Soetoro Obama said this. Hussein Obama said, anybody who came to this country after January 1st of 2012 will be deported out of here. Do you remember hearing something about that?
I remember hearing something about that. I don't know if it ever actually happened or not.
Yes. So if that was the case, that was 7 years ago. So if you took all illegals that came over the last 7 years and you use Obama's plan that they had to go back to their country of origin, you'd probably get rid of about 5-6 million illegals.
Probably. But, you know, they're spread out all over the country. It's going to be very difficult financially and logistically to basically track them all down and say, yeah, you're not supposed to be here. But it's got to be done. I mean, if you look at 27 million illegal immigrants and they're using phony Social Security cards to get jobs, those are jobs that could have gone to some of those 102 million legal American citizens who have not been able to find work for years. Anyway, listen, Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, we're standing in front of you with our hands out. And I want to start by saying that there has been an increase in donations, and we thank you. Some of them have actually been fairly generous. And I wish I could say, that's it, you know, our shortfall is covered, but I can't. We are in dire financial need to keep on the air, to keep getting the truth out to you. And it's always very uncomfortable to have to do these public begs. I think back many, many years ago, it's like 20 years ago, there was this big stink about this TV pastor who got up there and said, if you don't send $1 million by the end of the month, God will call me home. And betrayed a certain lack of ethics and morals. And, you know, we're trying to be ethical and moral here. But we do need your help. And the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. What really happened thanks you. Okay, so let's see. We're going to go to the phones here. Layla up in Canada, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Actually, I just wanted to, I think it was Al who was calling about, from Canada, calling about universal health care. And he talked about the long wait times. The problems are even worse than simply long wait times. It's the quality of care, that universal health care, it really jeopardizes standards.
Yes.
And it puts such a tremendous stress on the system. Not only that, it then acts as bait, as honey for the bees to come rushing over, because most of the world has become hypochondriacal.
Yes.
Got into this notion of, quote, preventive health care. That was fine when we were a small population, that you could have this notion that you needed a yearly checkup to make sure everything is working right. Now, I'm going to be 74 in July. I have not been to my doctor's office in 7 years, except when he called me in once to just make sure I was okay. I have not been in a hospital after I was told that I had a fracture in my neck that I didn't even know I had, that I have severe disc degeneration. And despite all of that, even though I'm 70, I'm able to lift 90-pound patio stones because I can't find reliable help. The point is that sometimes ignorance is bliss because you don't limit yourself by knowing too much. Now, I do have a question about Claire's case, though. To develop a fracture at her age is very unusual. I don't know how long I've had the fractures in my spine and neck. I mean, I used to ride horses, so it could have been any time from my 20s up until I stopped in my 50s. But was it known that she had a fracture in one of her vertebrae, or at the very beginning of the 3-month wait, or was
No,
it only...
we had no idea what had happened. It's just she had the accident. We knew there was something wrong with the back. We were trying to get to a doctor. We went to a chiropractor. Actually went to 2 of those. And I mean, she was in just such intense pain. And yeah, we didn't actually know what had happened until at the end of the 3 months, and we went into the clinic and they did an MRI and they said, oh, you've had a compression fracture of this vertebra. And so it was a very rough time.
Yeah, so if she wasn't actually waiting 3 months after she knew that she was told that she had a vertebral fracture.
No, it was three months between when the injury happened and we were able to find out what the injury actually was.
Yeah, and the established medical establishment always, from the time when I used to work in the medical field, I remember whether it was male or female doctors, whenever it was a woman complaining about any kind of pain, especially an elderly woman, if she was either, in need of attention, if she was younger, she needed da-da-da-da, you can fill in the blanks. So they always tend to disregard a woman, and especially an older woman who complains of pain.
Well, I mean, this was a serious injury, and I'm very upset that we couldn't get some timely care for her, because she went through 3 months of literally hell. I mean, not being able to sleep, trying to sleep in a chair because she couldn't lie down on the bed. I mean, it was just an ugly situation, and thank goodness we were able to get our hands on some Kratom, because she was able to tamp down the pain with that. Anyway, listen, Layla, I need to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Layla in Canada. We're talking about healthcare, and you had a comment before about how under Canada's universal healthcare plan that the quality of service had declined. Well, that's true here in the United States, where we don't have universal health care. It's reached a point right now where medical mistakes are the 3rd leading cause of death in this country. And doctors are killing far more people than assault rifles are.
I agree with that, because doctors have become more mercenary.
Yes.
They're more merchants of problems than they are actually healthcare providers. When I look back to the way things used to be 50 or 60 years ago in Canada, when we did not have universal health care, it was so far superior, and the dignity of the individual was the most important thing that I remember was maintained. Vaccinations were rare.
Yes.
They were almost unknown. To me, the biggest liability of so-called universal, quote, free health care is that somebody has to pay for it.
Yes.
And those who have jobs are now considered the rich, which is insane.
Yes.
But even so, it's like honey to the bees. I mean, this is what first began attracting migrants. First it was anchor babies, and then it was anybody from everywhere who wanted to get in because there was free health care, free education, free this, free that. All they knew was that if they could get over this imaginary line that created a border, then they would be able to get a whole bunch of freebies, and they wouldn't have to do anything. And the worst part is, Now, I never collected unemployment insurance or welfare or any of those things, but I remember from friends who did that when they wanted their unemployment insurance, they had to go in person to pick up their unemployment check. They'd wait in line, and they had to provide proof that they had actually been looking for jobs.
Yes.
Now, I can't even get someone to do any landscaping or any work at all. I have to do it myself. Because why should they? If they can sit at home and their check is automatically direct deposit into their bank account, who's going to work?
Yes.
And then they've also got the free drugs that are being handed out to them. All they have to do is go to a, quote, free drug place. I mean, now when I go to shops, it's the old white folks that built this country that used to have what used to be called the Protestant work ethic. They're the ones who are the underlings, and their supervisors are the ones of recent migration with darker skin and accents. It's the most bizarre thing, and the turnaround has happened so quickly.
Yeah, and it's happening quickly here in the United States. Getting on back to doctors being mercenary, and again, this goes back to the Health Maintenance Organization Act, which was signed by Richard Nixon as a favor to his friends over at Kaiser. There was a story that came out a while back where when hospitals are deciding which doctors to keep on staff and which to let go, it's all based on how much revenue they generate. If you're not generating enough revenue, then you will lose your position at the hospital. And so, yeah, they're all about pushing product, pushing a service, selling you stuff. It's all about selling product.
Yeah, and making you addicted and dependent upon the concept that you need the health care, whatever it is. And it actually, it's a debilitating thing, this dependency that we've created. But I remember when I worked in hospitals that the doctors were actually being bribed by pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, yes.
They were being given junkets.
Yep.
Trips here and trips there. So it's not a recent thing, but what has made it so difficult, and also hospitals are terribly unsanitary, filthy. While I watched my mother dying of breast cancer, and she finally pulled out the tubes and said, "Layla, take me home so I can die in peace." And this was at the world-renowned, what's formerly world-renowned McGill Hospitals in Montreal, the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal General. It was just so bad that my mother just chose to go home and die in dignity. And after I watched that, I swore I would never go anywhere. I've never had an MRI, a CAT scan, or any of those fancy doodad things, because they're all part of the system.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, it creates a dependency on our part. It creates a liability because it attracts all the people who want to get the health care that we've paid for and we're supposed to be able to use. And then we've had so many scandals.
Yes.
Doctors sexually abusing patients. Well, there was a case of one man, and I'm going to say his name because it was in the newspapers, Dr. Dudnot. He was convicted and sent to jail. He was a migrant from India. What he used to do was when the women were having surgical procedures in the lower half of their abdomen, there's always a blue screen. He was literally, and the hospitals at first wouldn't listen to the women complaining. He was inserting his, into their mouth while they were half under. And when that women complained, the hospitals would say, "Oh, you're just imagining it because you were in that semi-anesthetic state. You weren't completely under." Until there were so many, they finally had a trial, and the man was convicted. But that, and also I read about another case where a man was paralyzed, and because they had mental patients mixed in with the general populace, and they had 4 or 5 to a room when it was only made to accommodate 2. One man who was paralyzed was being force-fed fecal matter by another patient.
Oh, that sounds ugly. Anyway, listen, Layla, I need to cut you off. We're running out of time. We're coming to the end of the show. I've got another caller waiting on the line. So thank you very much for the phone call. And we're going to let you go and switch over to Eric in Tennessee. Aloha, Eric. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Michael, great call from Layla, by the way.
Yes.
My major thinking is what and how much do you need in donations to get yourselves back to the mainland?
Well, I'm almost afraid to say a number because it might be just too scary. But we need an angel basically to drop a big chunk of cash on us right about now. We had an angel drop a big lump on us last year right when our car got stolen. And that's what we used to buy the newer car. But no, we're talking thousands of dollars here.
20,000?
Yep.
More.
That would do it.
Accurate. And you're kind of planning on fall to get back here?
I'm planning on what?
On this fall?
This fall, might have to push it into the spring. It depends on when the money comes in.
Okay, and it's maybe the question is Claire able to travel that far?
It's going to be very difficult for her to do, but she's got this special back brace that she wears, and we certainly get around in the car well enough. But yeah, it's going to be a very, very difficult flight for her to endure. It's going to be 5 hours from here to the West Coast, and then another 4 hours from there to where we're ultimately going.
Right. Okay. Well, you have my contact information. Feel free to call me and set up a conference call with the three of us, and maybe I can help you out in some ways. Maybe do some fundraising efforts to try to raise some funds to make it work.
Well, I appreciate that. We need all the help we can get right now. The situation is stressed, and so am I. Anyway, Eric, thank you very much for the offer. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go. Pardon me. Okay, over in Great Britain, they're having their local elections, or had their local elections. It was a humiliation for Theresa May, and her Conservatives are hemorrhaging councillors, and apparently the Liberal Democrats and independent candidates had a spectacular night in the 2019 local elections. So Theresa May is in trouble over there. Over in Paris, Antifa stormed a hospital, threatening the staff and patients. And it was this group of black-clad extremists made violent and threatening gestures. And according to the hospital director, Marie Ann Reuter, she was shocked that the anarchists would choose to target a hospital during the riots. So am I. That doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense here. Russia Today story talking about how MasterCard has just decided they're going to stop doing business with conservatives. That if you want a MasterCard credit card, you have to be a liberal. It's getting very dystopian out there, but apparently the Securities and Exchange Commission is saying, yeah, this is perfectly acceptable behavior. They can do business with whoever they want to do. Now, last week, there was a big story about this evil Russian dolphin that had been found off the coast of Norway. And it was a beluga dolphin, and it was wearing wearing a harness. And everybody's saying, oh, had to be from Russia, testing a Russian weapon. The harness was labeled equipment of St. Petersburg, and that's why they said had to be from Russia. But it turns out the harness was equipped with a GoPro camera. So it was probably some university research program where the beluga whale decided not to come back home. Okay, this happened last week, and I absolutely loved it. There was a video to it. Over in Pakistan, there was this Islamic preacher saying Muhammad came to him in a dream and said all Jews should be killed, and if he's lying, the stage will collapse. at which point the stage collapsed. So, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Out in Nevada, officials are working to fight what's called the Sovereign Citizens Movement. And of course, this news article coming out of Review Journal, it's a little biased toward the government here. But apparently, Nevada's Attorney General Aaron Ford is saying that the sovereign citizens are the largest terroristic threat facing Nevada, and he described them as an anti-government extremist group, and basically linking them to the Bundy standoff, saying that law enforcement in southern Nevada is no stranger to dealing with those who follow the sovereign citizens' ideology. They don't believe in federal or state laws. They don't believe in paying taxes, often espouse hatred of police and elected officials, all factors that have led the FBI to deem those in the movement domestic terrorists. Well, that may have been a setup, because I remember when the sovereign citizens movement first began, it was more about public education. But I have a feeling they got infiltrated by people who then behave badly, so the corporate media then has an easy handle to say, ooh, bad people, bad people, bad people. And apparently Nevada has a bill under consideration that would give law enforcement more tools to prosecute sovereign citizens. So it's a big crackdown there. Over in St. Louis, there is a big crime problem. There are very high rates of black-on-black violence, which have prompted a black alderman to call for the deployment of the National Guard. So this alderman, Brandon Bosley, says he's fed up with the murders and violence in the northern part of the city, and he wants Missouri's Governor Mike Parson to send in the National Guard to restore order. That's pretty serious stuff, and we didn't see that on the corporate media. Okay, finally, a little bit of common sense. Last week we reported on this transgender athlete who basically broke a whole bunch of records in female weightlifting. And the Weightlifting League has revoked those awards. And it said, our rules and the basis for separating genders for competition is based on physiological classification rather than identification. This is a statement from Paul Bosey, president of 100% Raw Powerlifting Federation. And on the basis of all information presented to the board of directors for this case, the conclusion made is that the correct physiological classification for this individual is male. And since the lifter's gender classification for the purpose of our rules is not consistent with female, no female records will be broken by those lifts. Finally, some common sense is coming on out there. And I'm glad, because those ladies who competed and who would have won, they deserve their trophies. They deserve their medals. Donald Trump last Thursday moved to give oil and gas companies more flexibility in meeting safety requirements imposed after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon explosion, which killed nearly a dozen people and was the worst offshore oil disaster in U.S. history. Now, the revised rules come as the administration pushes to expand drilling off the U.S. coasts, although court challenges and opposition from many coastal states have slowed the efforts. All right. Trump's Environmental Protection Agency, ignoring a huge amount of science, is proposing that glyphosate be reapproved for use here in the United States consumer products. And as you know, the World Health Organization has declared it a probable carcinogen. Even the EPA's own Office of Research and Development and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry have acknowledged there appears to be a link between glyphosate and cancer. But then, heck, if you get cancer, that's more money for the cancer hospitals, right? That's the way it works. Over in Flint, Michigan, they have managed to botch the attempt to replace the lead pipes underneath the city. Flint gave the contract to a firm with apparently no experience doing this, and we're talking $600 million in state and federal aid. Apparently, the majority of the pipes dug up were copper, which is not a problem. So we're going to take a break here for commercials, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, the final segment of our program today. There was this big stink growing where over in India, PepsiCo was threatening to sue Indian potato farmers for growing a type of potato that Pepsi, one of their subsidiaries, makes into potato chips. Now, it's not a GMO potato, and it's kind of hard to understand why Pepsi is claiming a patent on it, but apparently the backlash against that was so severe that PepsiCo is withdrawing the lawsuit and saying, we'll just go away here. Okay, over in Greenland, the ice glacier is growing, while the climate alarmists are going into mass hysteria that defies the real-world measurements. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff tried to go on out there pushing Alexandria's Green New Deal using a debunked 13-year-old article in order to declare there's a climate emergency. And this article came out of this study published in 2006 by Boris Worm and others. And it's got enormous staying power in the media, but it's been rejected within the fishery science community, and indeed Worm et al. Themselves in 2009. In other words, in 2006, they came out with this very alarmist report, and then in 2009, they issued another article saying, no, we were wrong. And yet, the politicians, they're just out there looking for anything they can wag at you to scare you into doing what they want you to do. Over at Insys Therapeutics Incorporated, last Thursday, the founder of that company became the highest-ranking pharmaceutical executive to be convicted to a case tied to the U.S. opioid crisis when he and 4 colleagues were found guilty of participating in a scheme to bribe doctors to prescribe an addictive painkiller. So a jury in Boston found John Kapoor, the drug maker's former chairman, and his co-defendants guilty of racketeering conspiracy for engaging in a scheme that also misled insurers into paying for the drugs. Meanwhile, corporate media is calling for the arrest of the anti-vaxxers. This came out of the Washington Post. Juliet Kayyem to basically said, we've got to find and arrest people who choose not to vaccinate. And they're out there wagging measles around like it's the next Ebola. There are 700 cases in the United States. Yeah, out of a population of 300 million. And measles doesn't kill. There was one case, I think in the last 10 years up in Oregon, where a woman died of measles immediately after getting the measles vaccine. The measles vaccine kills far more people than measles does. And now they're pushing a new law that will allow dentists to administer vaccinations. That's how crazy it's getting. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do the Jim Goddard show up in Vancouver. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Use email, paper mail, face-to-face conversation. Social media is an absolute desert right now. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.